Let's take a look at the Guion cocktail, an interesting variation on the martini. Welcome to the Cocktail Spirit from Small Screen Network. I'm your host, Robert Hess. The Guion cocktail, I first ran across it in the old Waldorf Astoria bar book, or actually from the Waldorf Astoria bar days, which predates the bar book by a few years. It's one of the recipes they served quite a bit at the Waldorf Astoria. It apparently was named after a family member from the Guion steamship line. They were a steamship that went from London to New York. They were one of the major lines on that route in the late 1800s. About 1892, they ended up going bankrupt for whatever reason. Businesses do that sometimes. And I guess one of the family members after that was a regular at the Waldorf Astoria, and so they named this drink after him. Let's take a look. We start off with 1.5 ounces of gin. This recipe specifically called for Plymouth gin, so that's what we're using. Then we add 1.5 ounces of sweet vermouth. To that we're going to add 2 dashes of orange bitters. I'm using the Bitter Truth orange bitters here. One of the interesting things, anybody that's researched into cocktails much at all, you see orange bitters using an awful lot in the old recipes. After Prohibition, around 1940s, when new cocktail recipe books started coming around, you see orange bitters used less and less. Angostura bitters becomes the only bitters out there. During the 1990s, when the cocktail renaissance was happening, we're all looking at these old books and saying, gee, all these books are asking for orange bitters and we can't find it. When orange bitters finally came back on the market again, we were extremely pleased because now we could take and have drinks like the martini, which originally called for orange bitters, made the way it would have been made prior to Prohibition, when those cocktails really were in their heydays. So again, we're using a gin drink with orange bitters, which is predominant. And quite frankly, what we've got here is 1.5 ounces of gin, 1.5 ounces of sweet vermouth, orange bitters. This is essentially the original martini before it was dried out by using dry vermouth instead of sweet. But why is this the Guion cocktail? What makes this different? Well, what's going to make it different is the step I do at the very end, which I'm not quite ready for yet. Now let's add the ice. And like any drink that uses all clear ingredients, we stir it rather than shake it. James Bond, of course, would have made his drink wrong by asking for it shaken, not stirred. Pour it in our glass. Now, since this dates from the Waldorf Astoria days and the heydays of cocktails, I'm going to use a nice old cocktail glass. The gold rim kind of matching the color we're getting from the sweet vermouth coming through. Now, I mentioned there's a difference to this drink. This difference is now going to come in with the final garnish step. We're going to take and use a spoon of Benedictine. That's the way the recipe called for. They didn't say exactly what that measure was. They said a spoon. So rather than my normal small bar spoon that I love to stir with, I'm instead going to use a larger spoon so I can take and actually add a nice flavored dollop on the top. Benedictine, of course, is a herbal liqueur with a lot of flavors to it. So this is going to definitely add some interesting characteristics. It's really not going to float on the top like a Pousse Café might, but instead it's going to incorporate, but just not quite the same way as incorporating into the drink. So let's take a look at this Guion cocktail and see what it tastes like. And of course, by pouring the Benedictine on the top, one of the predominant aromas I'm getting is the herbs from the Benedictine. The sweet vermouth herbs and the gin botanicals are also playing a nice flavor role in there. They blend really well, all three of those ingredients. The Benedictine is a real big note in this drink. If you don't like Benedictine, you may not like this drink, or this drink might be a good way to introduce yourself to that flavor, since it really does take and capture a good component of it. The gin and the sweet vermouth are kind of a background notes that are going on to it. So it's sweeter than a regular martini might be. It's probably a little bit more flavorful component than a regular sweet martini would be, but personally I think it's an excellent cocktail. The Guion cocktail.